All right, so in looking at where we would have stopped yesterday in terms of food chain, right? So food chain is basically the sequence by which energy passes from plant to animal and then to other animal, and we would have looked at this food chain yesterday. Now there is another food chain on the screen. That's the
Good afternoon, sir.
yeah. Good morning. That's to the right there. Now, as for that food chain, now you're seeing the algae, and that is actually plant that would be in water. Then you have snail, crayfish,
Good
fish.
morning, sir.
Good morning, and then alligator. Now, this is basically a aquatic food chain. So the one on the previous slide, which is this one, this would be terrestrial. So once you're being asked to give food chain or write examples of food chain, then we can differentiate between aquatic food chain and terrestrial food chain. That would be the food chain on land. Now, there are simple food chain that persons can know if our persons can formulate by themselves. You will realize that these food chain they are we have like five or four different living organism. Now a simple food chain can be grass, cow, human. Or you have grass, goat, human. Right? Those are just simple food chain. So it don't have to be as lengthy as these that are actually here. It is just that based on the question then persons would know how much animal or how much living things to put in that particular food chain. So the point at the top there is saying that feeding is a process by which organisms obtain energy and raw materials for life processes. So in order for human being, for example, which of course we would fall under the
So you're
category
gonna send them in the group, sir?
what the notes
Yes, sir.
I can resend it because I would have sent it yesterday, but I'm gonna resend it.
So you have to screenshot the picture them, sir, because sir, this thing that is moving slow, sir.
Okay, so I have to send it in image format.
Yes, sir.
All right, no problem. I'll do that for you. I'll do that for you. Right. So in terms of human being, for example, if we want to get the nutrients, like for example protein, fat, and of course carbohydrate to give us energy, then we would have to feed on those animals that of course will be the dead remain of those animal after they are being butchered, and of course plant that would be like fruits and vegetable. That is if we want to get the functionality of those organism. So the arrows in a food chain normally show the direction. So in our food chain, the arrows normally show the direction where the energy basically traveling. That's where it normally show the energy. So the second point I saying the arrow show the direction of energy flow from organism to organism in the ecosystem. So and remember yesterday we would have looked at ecosystem, which simple mean that the ecosystem that is where you have a community of different living organisms and they normally feed on each other. So the ecosystem very very important in terms of um you being able to understand food chain. The third pointer, the different stages of feeding in a food chain are called trophic levels. So trophic levels, so that is the different stages. So in terms of the trophic levels, when I draw a food chain, the one that is on the screen, for example, it would have one, two, three, four, five different trophic levels. So what is known as the trophic levels is how many organisms within that food chain. So let's say, for example, I ask you to draw a food chain with three trophic levels. Then you can give me, for example, grass, cow, human. So again, in terms of trophic levels, it is basically how much stages in that food chain or how much living organism in that food chain. So if I say give me a food chain with
So
two
for
tro-
example, sir,
yes.
so for example, a rabbit, a plant may be eaten by a rabbit, which eaten by a fox.
So that right. So that would be a food chain with three trophic levels. Give me one with two. Give me a food chain with two trophic levels. Think of one, man. Just think of one food chain with two trophic levels. None. Nobody can think of a food chain with two trophic levels. On the board and on the screen, we have a food chain with five trophic levels, and that is simply because five different organisms on it. You can't think of any with two. Come on, think. Must can
Sir,
find. Yes.
so you have goat, sir,
Uh-huh.
and a human eat goat.
Right, perfect. Right. So that's a food chain with two trophic levels. Or if you have cabbage, forward arrow human being, callaloo forward arrow human being. You understand? Banana, forward arrow human being. Yeah. Those are food chain with two trophic
And
levels.
human
Sir,
eat
please
fish.
repeat.
No, I'm just giving. I'm saying cabbage.
Sir,
Yes, Mackenzie. You want me to
sir,
repeat?
please repeat.
Repeat the food chains? No, no. I was just giving some examples. Mackenzie, you hear me? I was just giving some examples of food chains with two trophic levels. So I'm saying you have, like, for example, cabbage. Then you have the forward arrow, human being. So that would be two organisms. Then you have callaloo, forward arrow, human being. You can put all of the fruits them orange, forward arrow, human being.
And
Banana.
fish eat and human eat fish.
But in terms of the food chain with putting fish in it, no, lowing fish wouldn't fit into this one. You would have to construct a different food chain, like for example, you would have algae, forward arrow, fish,
Sir,
forward arrow, human being. Yes,
or chicken, sir.
chicken. Yes. So, but remember, don't mix up the food chains, them, because whenever you're constructing a food chain, you're supposed to actually show which organism eating which one. So it's not just calling the names. It have to
Yes, sir.
link up.
Like that, sir, like you have the goat, sir, and you put a goat, sir, then the arrow, and then you put human, sir.
Right. Yes. So in terms of the food chain, the length of the food chain have to do with how many organisms. So whenever I'm asking you to do food chain, then I will basically tell you how much trophic levels I want to be in that food chain.
Yes, sir.
Alright, so feeding relationship. This is a good example of how living organisms in an eco system interact with each other. Now, as for the food chain, we have different aspect of the food chain in terms of what each organism is labeled as for that food chain. So a food chain normally start out with what is known as a producer. So these are organisms that make their own food, right? And that mostly be plants. The producer, the producers are green plants in most terrestrial ecosystem, which make food by the process that is known as photosynthesis.
Sir, sir, I have a meaning for ecosystem, sir.
You have a meaning for ecosystem?
Yes, sir.
What is the meaning?
The relationship between plants and animals and their environment.
Right, right, yeah, perfect. Right, so and it have to be within that specific environment, because in terms of ecosystem, you can have more than one ecosystem, because the ecosystem is basically those
You can
plants.
have it technology to serve.
Repeat.
You can have it all in technology to serve.
Yeah. All right, so the moving on, in terms of the different labeling for the food chain, we have some things that are known as consumers. So in terms of the consumers, so organisms that feed and each other, and we have herbivores. So herbivores are normally organisms that feed on plants only. So when you look at a food chain, I can ask you to take.
Sir,
Yes, Mackenzie. Yes,
sir,
yes, sir.
um, after you finish, please send YouTube link because the internet now work good for me that area.
Oh, okay, no problem, no problem, Mackenzie. All right, so in terms of herbivores, now herbivores are normally organisms that eat plants only. So in this food chain here, for example, the grasshopper would be the herbivore, because as for this food chain, the grasshopper is the organism that feed on plants. Carnivores, so in terms of food chain, the organisms that we call carnivores are the one that feed on other animals only. So that simply means that these organisms, they don't feed on plants, only meat or anything that is animal they actually feed on. So like for example, lion, tiger, alligator, crocodile, those organisms actually feed on animal only. So when you look at these
They're
terms,
secondary consumers, sir.
right? Yeah, the secondary consumer normally being carnivores, because secondary consumer.
Other animals eat animals, sir.
Yeah.
Sir,
Yes, and Anderson.
sir, you said that crocodile only feed on animals, sir, and some crocodiles bite, sir. So, sir, they actually eat humans, sir.
Yeah, yes. If they are, alright, it depends, because some of them they are pets,